Hello and welcome. My name is Jodie Thornton, and today we are doing a webinar on help your child stop hitting. So I am joining you from the lands which you may know as Canberra in Australia, and these are actually the lands of the Ngunnawal and Ngambri peoples. And I'd like to acknowledge the Ngunnawal and Ngambri peoples as the custodians of these lands, waterways, and skies. And I also pay my respect to the past and present Ngunnawal and Ngambri elders. Now, if you happen to be in the land we call Australia, or even if you're not and you're interested, you may want to check out the work of Children's Ground, which is an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander-led organisation. And their focus is on ensuring that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children are educated in their own language, which is so important, not just for children to be connected to culture and receive a culturally appropriate education, but it's also really important because it helps to keep the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander languages alive. So quite a few of the languages are at risk of being forgotten. And so part of this work is helping to keep those languages alive. You can check that work out at childrensground.org.au. So I am Jodie Thornton. So I have four children who are 26, 23, 11, and 9. And I have a granddaughter who is 3. And ours is a blended family. So my oldest two were my husband's from his first marriage. And I met them when they were 5 and 8. And it's kind of how I got into this work because, when we had the regular blended family issues come up, I went and got advice from psychologists and social workers, and they were definitely helpful for me in terms of understanding how my own childhood shaped my parenting views, as well as how my then partner, who became my husband, and his ex-wife and her then husband, it helped me to understand how all of us were shaped by our own childhoods, and that helped me to support all of us to work as a team for the kids' sake. But I really felt, although those services were really helpful, I really felt that there was something missing in, like, what am I supposed to do when it comes to challenging issues, or even helping the kids become independent, or like all of these different things. It just felt like there were skills that I didn't have, and I just didn't feel like there was anywhere that I could find them. And so through a lot of trial and error, and also finding a lot of piecemeal resources and kind of blending them together. Once I felt like I was really confident, I started working with families. And so that is now 8 years ago that I started supporting other families with this. And it's the best job I could ever have. I really enjoy it. And in terms of my own development, where I'm focused at the moment is healing that bossy/people pleaser cycle. So that piece where it's like I feel like I have done all the overthinking, all the analysis, and I have, the best plan, versus acquiescing and being a people pleaser, and actually not choosing either one of those paths, but actually learning how to support us all to work together and like respect each other's autonomy, but also find a way that works for everybody. And so that's the kind of the piece that I'm working on at the moment in my own development. So today we are going to focus on how to proactively reduce the likelihood of your child hitting, and how to respond in the moment that your child hits that builds their ability to choose a different behavior without invalidating their feelings. So I'd love to know if you are open to sharing, what have you tried to get your child to stop hitting? The most common strategies that I hear from parents are saying things like, it's okay to be angry, it's not okay to hit, or gentle hands. And both of those, it feels like they're repeating themselves. They say it all the time, but it just doesn't seem to be having an impact. I hear a lot of parents try encouraging their children to hit a pillow or a cushion or just something else that is appropriate to hit. I hear parents trying to say, use your words to help a child to express themselves verbally rather than lashing out. Parents are trying time out. Parents are trying time in. Parents are trying to focus on teaching their child to have empathy for others. Breathing exercises, I've heard other parents trying, they're just waiting until their child develops impulse control. And of course, the things that we may or may not feel comfortable with in terms of our values, but sometimes we end up doing anyways, is yelling punishments and consequences. And I hear from both the parents who don't want to be doing those things, but their own impulse control isn't there, and they end up doing those things anyway. And I also hear from parents who it's not that they believe that those approaches are in line with their values, but ultimately they feel like they need to do something to stop the hitting, and they try it, and even that doesn't work, right? And no matter which strategy that they're trying, if they end up talking to me about their child's hitting, it's just not working. No matter how consistent they are, no matter how kind they are with the implementation, it's just not working. And so we really need a developmentally appropriate way to stop the hitting. We want to, this is something that I feel quite strongly about, is not just waiting until they have the impulse control. So not just allowing it to go on, accepting that, yes, they're too young to have impulse control, so therefore we're just going to do what we can. But when we're not focused on actually getting the hitting to stop, we miss out on a bunch of benefits. So one being the obvious one, protecting the siblings or friends that are getting hurt, because they're often quite little, or even if they're not little children, they can be kids that are really struggling with the fairness of being hit regularly. Excuse me for clearing my throat. And next one is that I'll hear from parents who are saying that like their partner or their ex are actually saying that they just don't want to engage with gentle parenting anymore because of the fact that their child is hitting and this is just not okay, right? And that can cause some distress because we can feel like that is not treating our children in a developmentally appropriate way, and or introducing a whole, it extends beyond just the hitting, right? It extends to lots of different aspects of parenting once we decide that gentle parenting, in inverted commas, doesn't work. We also want to look at protecting the relationships that they have with other people. And so, a child who hits can often have, people can be judgmental of them. People can maybe not judge, but be needing to protect themselves. So having some distance, whether that's physically or emotionally. We also avoid the risk of you losing your cool, because if you're getting hit or if your child is persistently hitting, it's really hard to stay regulated. Another part that's really important to think about is that if your child is hitting, it inherently means they're not getting their needs met. There is no fundamental need that is met by hitting another person. And so if your child is hitting, that tells us that they are definitely not getting the need met. And so we really want to actually get that need met so that we can stop the hitting. The other benefit that we get from really focusing on not just having a gentle approach, but also having the goal of getting the hitting to stop, is that the process of learning not to hit develops their emotional awareness, their communication skills, and their problem-solving skills. And even if your child is quite young, we're sowing seeds. So if your child is, let's say, 3 or older, we're directly working on these skills. If your child is under 3, we are planting seeds where you're doing most of the active work, but we are planting the seeds so that they will be able to develop those skills over time. So the standard approaches to getting children to stop hitting, they just suck. And I want to talk about why. So there's 2 reasons a child hits. So the first is that they are so emotionally dysregulated to the point that they aren't even choosing the behavior. They're just reacting. Or they think that this is the only or the best way to get their needs met. So it's an active choice. It might be a split-second choice. It might be a little bit in the reflex space rather than a conscious choice. But it is a choice because they're like, this is the only way, or this is the best way I know to get my needs met. But all of the standard approaches don't take that into account, right? What they're saying is you should be able to control your behavior even though you're dysregulated. Now, there's only 2 ways to do this, is to suppress the feelings or have impulse control. And if your child is too young to have impulse control, then we're saying they need to suppress their feelings. And that's not awesome for their emotional development. And both of those options, suppressing their feelings and developing impulse control, both of those options are far slower than helping them to learn an emotionally aware way to handle the hitting, which is what we're going to be doing tonight. So even if we decide that suppressing their feelings is better than hitting somebody, it's still a slower way than getting them to understand their feelings in the way that we're going to talk about tonight. The other flavor of the approaches that we see to helping children to stop hitting is that getting your need met is not important. What's important is whether you're impacting other people negatively. And so what we're saying is, yeah, sure, you might be upset, but you can never impact somebody else negatively. Ultimately, that's people pleasing, right? And that doesn't mean that hitting is supported or appropriate or approved of. But what we're saying is that those are not the only two options, right? And so even if we were to say, yes, we need to focus on how we negatively impact other people, again, it relies on suppressing your feelings, which is not ideal for children's emotional development. And again, it's slower, right? And so if our goal is to stop this child from hitting, we want to take the quickest path because that helps them in all the ways that I was talking about earlier. So if a child has regulation in the moment where they're hitting, when most people talk about regulation, what they really mean is not true emotional regulation. What they mean is that you should behave on the outside differently to how you feel inside. And that's not regulation, that's suppression. That's saying, I'm feeling this way, but I'm not going to behave this way on the outside. And when we say take a deep breath or calm down, when we say take a deep breath or it's okay to be angry, it's not okay to hit, those kinds of things, what they hear is calm down. It's okay if you don't get what you need. Right. And so our child is like, well, so you're telling me I just have to acquiesce, like I have to just accept that I'm never going to get my needs met. And as a small child, they will rail against that. And as they get older, it becomes a judgment call of, is this a situation where it's important to me to get my needs met? Well, then I'm going to have to behave in a way that other people think is not appropriate because my need is actually really important. Now, when we talk about what true emotional regulation is, we're talking about helping a child get the nervous system safety so that they feel in their body the sense of I am not at my limits emotionally, and it's not going to take like one small thing is the last straw, or a big thing happens and I don't have enough capacity to hold it. And so what we want to start with is preemptive regulation. And I want you to start with preemptive regulation, whether your child is hitting out of being dysregulated and not making an active choice to hit, or if your child is making a conscious choice. Because even if your child is making a conscious choice, whether it's a reflexive choice or whether it's a thought out one, even if that's the case, that happens because they feel intensely about the need not being met. And if we can improve their baseline regulation, it gives them more capacity to handle difficulty without ending up in a place where I become dysregulated or I become reactive, or I'm making a choice that it's okay for me to negatively impact somebody else because this is important to me. So we really want to start with that preemptive regulation, regardless of which one your child is in. So we want to, in order to get that preemptive regulation happening, we want to look for two activities. One that makes them relax. So meditation is great if your child will. Now, a lot of parents laugh at me suggesting that because their child is in no way interested in meditating, but there are some children who will. And if your child is one of those, we want to use that. So whether that's silent meditation, which is the most difficult, or whether it's a guided meditation, if your child will do it, that's the most efficient way. So if they will do it, please do that. Now, if your child is one of the vast majority of children who will not meditate, what we're looking for is something that gets them into a similar flow state. So you can ask your child what makes their body feel most relaxed. Now, if your child, when actually, I'll use an example. So when my now 11-year-old was about 5, I asked her, when does your body feel most relaxed? And she said, when we're at the pool. Now, at that time, we did not go to the pool very often. There is no way I would have thought of that as an option. And at that time, it wasn't practical or realistic for me to take her to the pool regularly. But what I did was I made sure we had more time for bath time or shower time. And if it was a bath, I made sure that we filled it up further so she got more of that sense of being in the water, right? So we're looking for, what does your body feel most relaxed? If your child is old enough, I would say no matter how young, I think it's worth asking the question, because you're practicing asking, and we're planting seeds, right? You never know how young they will be, like how old they'll be when they can actually come out with an answer. So definitely ask and ask multiple times. If they say, I don't know, come back to it another time, and keep asking from time to time just to see if they have a new answer. If they don't know, then what you're looking for is, what do you pick up from what you see? Is it going for walks outside? Is it climbing? Is it cuddles? Is it painting or drawing, or who knows what it is? We're looking for anything that helps their body to feel relaxed, and just pay attention to what happens in their body language and see what you can pick up. And that goes whether your child is too young to have an answer, or whether you have a child that's older, but they're just not yet aware of what helps them. If you can take it like an observatory approach, that's not the right word, but you know what I mean. If you can observe what's going on for them, you might be able to come up with something that will really work for them. Now, the second type of activity we're looking for is ones that make them laugh. We all know we want to avoid tickling. So laughing sends a different type of signal to our nervous system that they're safe, a different to a meditative type of or relaxation type activity. But tickling activates both our fun and our fear receptors. And when we're trying to improve baseline regulation, we want to avoid anything that activates their fear receptors. So we want to avoid that if that's where we're focusing on. Now, once you've got, you could have one activity for each, or you could have multiple that work for your child. And ideally, we want to do one of each every day, but only if that's realistic in your routine. Because if it stresses you out to make space for 2 new activities every day, that's counterproductive, because your dysregulation impacts their regulation, right? So what you can do realistically and practically is great. So even if it's just once a fortnight, that's better. Excuse me, I'm so sorry for clearing my throat so much tonight. I'm not sure what's going on with my throat. A fortnight is every 2 weeks for those of you who are not in Australia. But like, if you can only do something once every 2 weeks, that is great. Whatever you can do is great. So if regulation works, so you implement preemptive regulation and all of a sudden your child is not hitting anymore, I don't want you to stop there. I want you to focus on, so when we improve regulation, we get more time to problem solve before they get overwhelmed. So if your child's new regulation routine means that they don't get overwhelmed anymore, our goal is not just to get them to stop negatively impacting other people. Our goal is to help them figure out what they need and find a way to get it that works for everyone involved, right? So if they stop hitting, we still want to focus on, what are the feelings that they're having that are coming up? What does that tell us about what they need, and how do we solve that? So that's what we're gonna go through the step by step of how to do that. But I just wanted to say, if you start off with step 1 and you get the result of the hitting stopping, keep going with the process, because it's really important for their overall emotional and communication skills development. So in the moment that your child hits, this is what's going on. So we've got a picture here. It's a Venn diagram. So we have one circle that says what they need, one circle that says what the other person needs, and in the overlapping area is what works for both of them. And I've got a little circle that's completely outside the Venn diagram that says hitting isn't even getting their need met. And so ultimately, what we want to know, and you can take a screenshot of this if it's helpful, what we want to know is that they don't want to hit, even if it appears that they do want to hit, even if they say to you that they do want to hit, what they want is in that blue circle, which is what they need. And when they're in that lighter blue circle outside, they're not actually getting the need met. What they're doing is a coping mechanism or a way to influence them getting what they need, but they're not getting their need met through the hitting. And so we want to make sure that we don't, that we recognize that they're not trying to do that. It's just that they don't know any other way. Now, when we take the idea of why not to tell them not to hit? It's a terrible sentence. I should rewrite it. But the idea is like in those moments where we say we don't hit people, I won't allow you to hit, gentle hands. It's okay to be angry. It's not okay to hit. All of those phrases in that moment, if we look at like a road that comes to a fork in the road, and the road that is labeled hitting takes them away from what they're trying to get to. It doesn't get their needs met, but they can't see the other road. And so when we say stop hitting in any of those formats, what we're saying, what they hear is that we are not going to get their need met. There's no path to where they need to go. And so our job is to move that cloud away that's blocking being able to see that there is a whole other way for us to travel, which will get us to what it is that they're wanting. So where we want to get to is that they're aware their feelings are building up, they problem solve, and if that doesn't work, before they think hitting is the only or best way to get their need met, they ask for help to problem solve. Now, even tiny children can problem solve. And I know it might feel unrealistic, but tiny children, like even tiny children, they're such scientists. They can problem solve. They may not be able to do the verbal processing that we would do, but even tiny children can problem solve. And so we want to build up their skill to be able to notice the feelings coming up, problem solve, and if they get stuck, they ask for help. And most likely, for most of us these days, we would be lucky to have like just one or maybe two gentle adults in their lives. But even even adults or even older siblings or friends who are not necessarily versed in gentle parenting, if they are asked to help in a situation where it's like, this is what I need, they'll be much better able to support your child rather than coming in after your child has hit somebody. So if you see the hitting coming, so you can see in their body language, or like this time of the day, it's going to happen when somebody takes somebody else's toy away from them, or there's something that it's going to come, it's coming, and it's before the hitting happens. We want to start with empathy. We want to start by reflecting to them that we see what they're feeling. And if we know what they need, we want to reflect that. So let's go with that example of let's say a 4-year-old child is working with Lego or Duplo. I'm going to say Lego. Let's say a 4-year-old child is working with Lego, and their younger sibling wants to play. Right? So they can see the younger sibling is coming over. You can see your 4-year-old they're physically tensing up because they know what's going to happen. You can say, oh, sweetie, are you worried that they're going to take your Lego? Right? We really just reflecting that we see and understand what's going on. We want to draw their attention to their body. It's like, I can see your shoulders are coming up high, or I can see your eyebrows are going close together, or your hands are getting tight. We want to draw their attention to their body because it's far easier for a child to notice a change in a physical sensation than it is to notice a change in their emotional state. So the more we can help them notice, oh, when I am worried that my sibling is going to ruin my Lego creation, I can see that worry comes up when my fists get tight, or when my shoulders go up, or like something physically shifts in my body, right? We're reflecting the need. you really want your Lego to stay all in one piece. You don't want it to go missing, or you really want to make sure that your creation doesn't get broken, right? Whatever the need is, we want to look for that. And then we're going to look for solutions that work for everybody. So you might, now this one, obviously, we're assuming the younger sibling is walking in slow motion because that's a lot of talking before they get there. But you might have already stopped the younger sibling from being able to reach the Lego before that happens. And then you might say, do you want to play with your Lego on the table so that your little sibling can't reach? Right? Do you want to give your sibling some of the pieces that are safe for them to play with? And I'll make sure that those ones don't get lost, right? We're looking for what is the solution that works for everybody. Now, if you need to say no, so let's say that the solution is, well, I want to play Lego and I want to play it in my room. And let's imagine that you have a rule of not having Lego in their room. We want to say the reason why first. Oh, I can see how if you could play your Lego in your room, that would mean that your sibling couldn't reach. The reason I am worried about that is because, let's come up with a reason. Because I really want to be able to see what you're doing. We all need to be in the same area, right? And that's why I'm going to have to say no to that. We want to say that no first because that helps them to stay regulated. Sorry, we say the reason before the no because that helps them to stay regulated. If we say no first, what their experience is, I'm not going to get my need met. If we say the reason first, they can see that this is a solvable problem. We can find another way, right? And it's not arbitrary. We're not just deciding without considering them. So our first job is if you don't get there before they hit, or if you don't see it coming, what we want to do is protect the person from being hit. So we use what's called the protective use of force, which comes from a Marshall Rosenberg quote, which is about, if we think about boundaries as the protective use of force, it gives us some frame of the idea of like, what's a reasonable thing to do to stop somebody from being hurt, right? And so if we stay with this example of a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old, the protective use of force might actually be picking up the 2-year-old, right? Because that will protect them. You are picking a 2-year-old up who is determined to get the Lego. They're not going to be comfortable, but that may be the best solution. You may want to put your hand between the kids so that your 4-year-old cannot hit, like they would hit your arm rather than your 2-year-old. You may need to grab your 4-year-old's wrists, or you may even need to pick your 4-year-old up and put them in a different room. But the level of force, we want to use the minimum we can, because the only time we want to use force is for the purpose of protection, right? We use the minimum amount of force we can, whatever that minimum is. Now, if they're hitting regularly, ideally we won't leave them without close supervision. But sometimes that's not realistic, right? Like if you have a situation where you're a single parent, or maybe one of the parents works long hours, or there's times where even just going to the bathroom, like there's times where sometimes it's not realistic that you can't always leave them without close supervision. But we want to look for like what are the ways we can do that if possible. If you can see the hitting coming, we want to get close and be ready. So in the witching hour leading up to dinner time, they're more likely to hit. Can you get the dinner done early and then be close and be ready to protect anyone else from getting hit? Again, obviously, it's not always realistic, but if you can, we want to do that. Now, this is when the child has already hit, and we've taken the step to protect everybody, right? So we've either removed the threat, or it's already happened, but we've now protected everybody. Our next step is to validate the feeling and the need. So you felt angry because you needed your Lego creation to stay together. You wanted it not to be broken, right? Maybe it's you felt frustrated that you weren't getting a turn with the toy. It might be you felt hurt because of what your sister was saying, and you needed her to understand how hurt you felt, and so you lashed out, right? So we're validating the feeling and the need. We're not validating the action, right? The hitting action is not what we're validating. We're validating how they felt and what they needed. Now, for little kids, if your child is too little to express them verbally, we still want to practice talking about it. So I want you to talk to small children as though they understand everything that you're saying, because kids' receptive language, so what they can understand of what people communicate to them, is far greater than their expressive language, what they can communicate to us. And so what we want to do is, if we wait until we know for sure they can understand us, we've missed a lot of opportunities to be able to communicate when they could have understood us, right? The other reason I want you to talk to kids as though they get it is because it helps you practice. So let's say your child is only 18 months old, and you know that going through these steps verbally is not actually going to land. You're still practicing how to say it in a way that you stay regulated, how to say it in a way that feels natural. You're practicing identifying the feelings and the needs, right? All of these things take practice. And so if you're starting before your child can understand, that means it makes it easier to be your default response when they can understand you. And also going through the verbal steps helps keep you regulated, because it keeps you focused on why they're behaving the way they're behaving, and then what are we going to do about it, that helps keep you focused on the moment and what to do, which helps you keep out of dysregulation. So for little kids, if you know the need, like you know them very well and you can see what the need is, say it and help them get the need met before they hear. But if you don't know the need, experiment and see what helps and what doesn't, right? We just need to work with what we've got. When kids are too little to either understand their needs or they're too little to express them, then we just want to experiment and keep going until we find something that works. Now, can be tricky because our culture does not focus on what needs are. Our culture focuses on whose turn is it to acquiesce, or who should acquiesce based on the situation. And so a lot of us are not versed in identifying our own needs or helping other people to identify their needs. So when you think you've found your child's need, we want to ask these questions to check. The first one is, does it feel valid? And if it doesn't feel valid to you, go deeper. So it's like, you just always want your own way. Like, that doesn't feel valid, right? Like, yes, it is a perception that sometimes we have of other people, and even sometimes people have of themselves, right? But it doesn't feel like a valid need. Like, always needing something to go your own way, it doesn't feel like it's a valid need. So we need to go deeper. What does that really mean? Another one is, are there theoretically a million ways to get the need met? And if not, go deeper. So I need to watch Bluey when we get home. Well, there's only really one way. Well, I guess it's two. You could do it on a TV or a tablet, or maybe a phone. That could be three. But there's not a lot of ways to get the need met. If we look deeper, what does watching Bluey when we get home do? Does it help them to regulate? Does it help them to feel like they have autonomy so they get to choose what they're going to do? Does it help? Like, what is the need being met by watching Bluey? Because there's only really one way to do that. So then we know it's not a need. We need to go deeper. Now, if you found a need and you try a strategy that works, does the feeling resolve, right? So it's like, does it feel like it's a bottomless pit of need? And so if the feeling doesn't resolve, it's either it's not the right need, or that strategy doesn't really work for your child as an individual. So often one that falls into this category is they need connection. So we do more one-on-one time, except there's never enough one-on-one time, right? That can tell us that it's probably not connection that's the root need there. Possibly the quality of the connection time wasn't awesome. So maybe if you were distracted, or maybe you were dysregulated, maybe you were doing your best and that's all you had to give at that moment. Or maybe you didn't notice that you really weren't engaged and the quality time wasn't really getting there. And so we need to try a different option to get that connection. But often, if it feels like it's a bottomless pit, that's actually not the need. It's not actually connection, it's something else. So commonly misunderstood needs are, they always, I always laugh that I want to pull these examples out, but it's always the ones that I used on the previous slide. So their way or autonomy, right? So if we think about, a lot of times people will perceive that children need things their way or they need to choose. It's not always the case. Sometimes the reason they want it their way, or sometimes the reason they want the ability to make the decision, which looks like autonomy, is because the other options that are being proposed don't actually meet their need. And if they don't get to choose, then their need doesn't get met. Right. And so we really want to be looking for, if we're focused on them getting their way or them having autonomy, we want to check, is it actually that, or is it sensory? Is it about connection? Is it, who knows, could be anything underneath what looks like or a need for autonomy. The next one is attention or connection. So you hear really, really common these days for people to talk about, it isn't attention seeking, it's connection seeking behavior. And it can be, for sure, not saying it's not, but often what even looks like connection seeking behavior is that connection is such a good, it feels so nice that it can help us let go of other needs. So if, let's say, the need was for, or let's say the need was for like a sensory experience, so they needed more quiet or they needed something to be more physically stimulating. If we can't get that need met, having connection in that moment is like it softens the disappointment. And so it appears to solve the problem, but connection wasn't the need, it was the other thing. It's just that connection makes me feel better about me not getting what I needed. And again, we come back to that option of like, if the solution to getting them to get to listen or to stop hitting is more one-on-one time, often there's it's like the one-on-one time is a coping mechanism, not actually focused on getting the needs met. So we just want to be careful of those two. And so then what we want to move to, so we've validated the feelings and needs. We believe we've identified what the needs, our child's needs are. Now we need to look at, okay, so what does everybody else need and what works for everybody who's involved? So if it's just you and your child, what do you need? What works for both of you? If it's a multiple sibling situation, what works for everybody? Now, some of the time we can't get the need met. Now, often it seems impossible because we're not practiced at finding solutions. Now, while that's true, like often if we had more time or more experience at problem solving, sometimes there are situations where it is just impossible to get everybody's needs met. And so when that happens, we want to make sure that we reinforce that their needs matter. We want to make sure that we let them know that you would meet the need if you could, right? We don't want to give those messages that are so common in how we talk in our culture. Is like, you should not, like once we realize that it's not practical for you to get that need met, you should not need it anymore, right? And that's not what we want to reinforce. We want to reinforce that we would meet the need if we could. We want to clearly explain what's in the way. So I know you really want to finish your Lego creation. The thing is that we told Nanny that we were going to be coming over for dinner and she's going to be ready to serve up in 20 minutes. And if we're not there on time, the dinner's going to go cold. And I know that you would rather stay here and play the Lego, but that means everybody else's dinner's going to go cold. And I'm so sorry, sweetie, but I'm not okay with that. Right? We're explaining clearly what is in the way of you saying yes. And then if we can't, we're just making the decision of like, what are we going to do? So let's go with that example about going to dinner or finishing the Lego. It's like, okay, so We have to leave now because if we don't, everybody's dinner will go cold. Could we bring some of the Lego with us? No, I don't want to bring it because last time I left it there and it will get lost and I'll forget. Okay, so what else could we do? Do you want to take a photo of where you're up to so you can think about it while we're at dinner? Right? No, 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 that doesn't work. Okay, so what else can we do? Right? And they may have an answer, they may not, but we want to invite them to come up with an option. And if there's no way for you to decide together, then just you make the decision. I'm so sorry, sweetie. I can't come up with something that's going to work. I know you really want to finish your Lego, but we're going to have to go now, right? And you're just making the decision and doing it. Now, if they have big feelings about you saying that their need can't be met, if you have the time and energy to empathize in the moment, do it then. But if you don't, so either you've run out of time or you are just not in an emotional space that you can hold space for them at that moment, then do it later. So if we assume that Lego example that you wouldn't be able to hold space in that moment, later you come home after dinner and you bring it up again. Sweetie, I'm so sorry I had to take you to Nanny's house when you hadn't finished your Lego. And then hopefully they'll be able to re-engage with those feelings and say, I didn't want to go and you made me. I know, I'm so sorry about that. I know you didn't want to go. All right. And really empathizing, again, reflecting their feelings and needs and recognizing that they're allowed to stay in the feelings. So we're not, the purpose of empathy is not to say, you've been heard, therefore we need to move on. It's like, I'll stay with you until your feelings are fully expressed. And hopefully that we can make a decision about what we're going to do. Next time, do you want me to give you a warning before we go to Nanny's house? Do you want to not play Lego when we're going to Nanny's for dinner so that you don't get interrupted? No, I definitely want to play Lego. Right. Okay. So what else could we do? Right. Again, we're looking for what are the solutions that will work. Now, once everyone has calmed down, so the situation's over, we want to do a do-over. The importance of a do-over is helping us build the skills to do it in the moment. So what we want to do is ask your child, what did you notice in your body? So when was the first moment that you noticed something was off and where did you notice it in your body? We want to, again, validate their feelings and their needs and then asking what would have worked. We're just practicing. It's the whole process. But instead of doing it in the moment, we're doing it again after the fact to process it. This practice builds the neural connections for both you and your child. So for you in leading them through this process and for your child participating in this process, it builds those neural connections almost as well as if we'd done it in the moment. And we're building those neural connections so that the more they can notice the feelings before they get overwhelmed, recognize the needs and problem solve, the more we avoid the hitting before it starts. Now, that's a lot of talking, which you might have guessed is actually my style. I do talk a lot. And it can feel like this is a lot to do. And will you even have time for this? Now, whenever there's no time to negotiate, you just make a decision, right? When there's time to talk about options, then you can talk about what might have worked. But in that moment, if you need to make a decision, you make a decision. Hold space for the feelings. We'll get there over time. That practice will mean you'll be clearer on both of your needs, and then you'll have more ideas that might work next time. So you might come up with ideas in advance for the next time that this situation comes up, or you'll just get better and more efficient at noticing the needs and figuring out what they are and figuring out solutions. And so again, you're building those neural connections. And so it just becomes your default behavior and it becomes easier and easier over time. So that once this becomes your default, it's actually quicker. You don't have to think about it. You don't have to go through all the steps. It just becomes a quicker way to deal with the situation than any of those options that we talked about at the start, which most parents are trying to get their child to stop hitting. This is quicker, easier. It gets to the solution. There's a learning process is all, right? There's just a time where we're just doing what we can as we learn. So the more often your child recognizes that you are trying to meet both of your needs and also the more often your child notices that their needs are getting met, the easier it is for them to accept the times when their needs can't get met. So when you have to say, we have to go, I'm sorry, you're not going to be able to finish your Lego, they will be they will get easier and easier for them to accept that no and be able to move through it without getting overwhelmed and hitting, and without needing a lot of time for you to empathize with them. For most people, so this is both our kids and for us, there's just a few needs that are either the ones that are just persistently unmet right now, or they're the most important to them individually. So I know that in the USA, I'm not really sure how Canada's school system works, but in the USA, a lot of kids have just started a new school year. When you go back to school, there's a lot more control over how you use your time. And so that need for autonomy can really come up in the first few weeks back at school before they get back into the rhythm, right? And so that need for autonomy might be persistently unmet right now. And so it's really coming up. Now, for both you, or they can be things that are just really important to them individually. Now, the more we get clear on what your needs are, what your child's needs are, it doesn't take long to identify, is it this, is it that? Those are the ones that come up most consistently, right? Then that becomes a much quicker process, and they can also express that without you even needing to ask the more often we practice. It will only, for most of us, we have most of our lives are kind of routine based, right? It's only so many things that happen. And so it really only takes so long for you to find ways to get both of their needs met, or theirs and your needs met consistently in those routine parts of life. Once you've figured those out, we don't need to negotiate or problem solve again until something changes, so the school year starts, or a new sibling comes, or a change in your family structure. It's only until something changes that we actually have to negotiate. And even then, when those things do change, the more you practice this process, the quicker you both get at identifying the needs and finding creative solutions. And so this really, it can, for some people, be a slow process at the start, but it just gets quicker and quicker as time goes on. If you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat box. And while I give you a chance to do that, I just want to talk through. Can you see now, the goal really isn't to stop the hitting. The goal is to teach your child to express what they need, to problem solve, and if they get stuck, to ask for help, right? So this process, yes, as I said at the beginning, we want the hitting to stop. That is an important part of this process. But how we're getting there is actually getting them to understand their feelings, to be able to express themselves assertively, and to problem solve. Right? Whether that's independently or whether that's with your help. And so if you'd like for us to be able to do this together, I can support you over a 4-week process, where what we would be doing is I can help you to recognize the needs that are at play most commonly when your child hits. Because I've been doing this work for 8 years, most of the time I can either pick it from your description of what's going on, or I can give you just 1 or 2 things to try so we can get clear on what that need is. I can also help you to find solutions that work for everyone involved, so that everyone's getting their needs met, and so they're just not needing to hit most of the time. Again, because I've been working with families for so long, and also I think part of it is that I'm not in it with you, you're in it. It's very difficult sometimes when we're in a routine, we're in a rhythm. It's difficult to think creatively about what might work. And often I can come up with things where it's just like, what about this? And you might be like, that'd be great. You also might be like, I can see where you're going with that. That wouldn't work for me, but what it makes me think of is this, right? And so that can be much faster to do that together. I can also help you to build your skills to be confident at responding in the moment when they hit, so you can protect everybody involved. And that can obviously be different, whether it's yourself, whether it's your partner, whether it's a younger or older sibling, friends, whoever it is. It can be a different scenario of how can you most effectively protect everybody involved and really respond well in the moment. I can also help you to build your skills to hold space for their feelings, so that when they can't get that need met, they can learn to not suppress the feeling, but experience those big feelings without lashing out. So being able to stay with those feelings and express themselves, and stick with the problem solving process, right? Without needing to lash out physically. Now, for most parents, once we go through those steps, they don't need help with regulation anymore, because once we go through those steps, they actually, their own regulation is easy to access. But for some parents, it is still really difficult to manage their emotions. So either the process of negotiation can be hard to engage with, if particularly if we've got a lot of, even if we logically know it's not true, it's like we don't feel like this should be such a big deal, or we feel like they should be more cooperative, or like those things can come up from our own childhoods. And so sometimes that can need some more help with regulation. And other times it can be just your child, if your child is hitting much less often, but it's still happening, that can still be quite dysregulating for some parents. And so in either case, I can help you with the skills to regulate your emotions, so that you're not suppressing and you're not being reactive with your child. You're still staying regulated and responsive with your child. So that would be over 4 weeks. So it's 4 sessions over Zoom of 45 minutes. So around about once a week is a good time frame, because we get to tweak what's working and what's not working about each week. And for that package at the moment, I've got 5 spaces at $197, and you can book in by emailing me. You can reply to any of my emails about this webinar. Now, for most kids, let's talk about what you can expect. So for most kids, your child will stop hitting within those 4 weeks, or they will be hitting very rarely. For some kids, it'll just be like far less often. So it's not necessarily going to go to the point where we would call it very rare, but it's a lot less often than it used to be. In those 4 weeks, you will be able to respond rather than react most of the time. Your responses will help your child to build the skills to notice their feelings, express themselves assertively and respectfully. And so those skills will be being built, even if it's not necessarily going to be happening within the 4 weeks, but we are planting those seeds so that your child is on the path to being able to notice, to build those skills. Where we want to get to is that even when you're not there, even when the other person isn't a gentle adult, your child can still notice their feelings, express themselves assertively and respectfully, and be able to problem solve. And so in those 4 weeks, we will get to a place where that's what your responses are on the path to doing. So your child may need more reinforcement than 4 weeks, but you'll be on that path and you'll be able to keep going once we're through those 4 weeks. Now, let's talk about what you don't need. We don't need your partner or your ex to be on the same page. If they are, that's fantastic. It's faster when we have other adults in your child's life who are on the same page. But for many of us, that's not the situation we're in, and we don't need that. So it is because we're focusing on a skills issue here. So we're focusing on your child's ability to recognize their feelings are building up and then get that need met. We can do that even if your partner or ex are not doing that in the same way. Your child will be able to build those skills and use them independently. As I say, it does take longer if it's only one of us, but we get there either way. You do not need time or any other kind of privilege that you may not have access to. I am a strong-willed kid who grew up to be a strong-willed parent coach, and I will find a way to work with whatever circumstances you have. So whatever is difficult about your situation, we will find a way to work with it so that we get to this place where your child is either they stop hitting altogether or they're hitting substantially less than they were. We will get there within those 4 weeks. You also don't need to be able to stay regulated yourself, because as I said, the more notice, the more you notice before you get reactive, you won't get reactive, right? And then the more we do the do-overs, the more you'll build those neural connections. It will make it your default response. But if you find it really hard to stay regulated when your child hits now, that is not an obstacle here. We will get there. So for most parents, once we do those key steps, your regulation will fall into line. If it doesn't, I'll help you build those skills. So just to reassure you that those are the things you don't need. So if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reply to any of the emails and let me know. I would absolutely love to support you with this. I think it's one of those issues that if we don't address it, it can go on for some time. Sometimes kids move through a developmental stage and then they stop hitting. But even so, remember when I said, like, if regulation works, don't stop there. Even if it's true that your child will move through this because they'll move through the developmental stage, we we still get those other benefits like the emotional awareness, the communication skills, and the problem solving skills. Those are all really important for your child in a much broader way than just the stopping of the hitting. But as I said, like, there's so many reasons why a child who hits can, it just causes so much stress and difficulty for the whole family. We just don't have to stay in that position. We can move through this. This is something that is a solvable problem, and we can get there. So I thank you very much for watching, and I'd love to hear from you if you have any questions or any difficulties along the way.